What is up, all you individuals out there? It is me, full-time anime man, and I gotta say, I genuinely missed you all. Like, it's been almost 100 days since the last freaking video. Probably, let me just check that real quick. Ooh, 98 days ago. Oh my goodness. Well, anyway, in case anyone's wondering, I've just been going through some stuff, but that doesn't really matter right now. I'm feeling a lot better now. So, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get back into the story. This is What If Deku Was a Firewolf, the final part. I hope you all enjoy. Where we last left off, Izuku had convinced Sir Night-Eye to let him into his agency. One day, when Izuku and Mirio were walking about doing some street patrolling, the two were having a conversation. Mirio: "So, how are you doing adjusting to Night-Eye's agency?" Izuku: I was a bit skeptical at first, but it's actually quite decent." During their conversation, Izuku felt something bump into the left side of his leg. He looks down and he saw a little girl with long white hair who had medical bandages covering most of her body and one horn on one side of her face. Izuku: "Oh, I'm sorry, are you okay?" The girl then looked up at Izuku with fear in her eyes. Eerie: "Please, help me." Izuku: What's wrong, little one? What do you need help with?" Izuku then picks the girl up to comfort her, and a man strolls from the alleyway and into the light. Overhaul: "Eerie, what are you doing? Why are you bothering these two gentlemen?" This man was wearing a green jacket with animal fur just around his neck area. He had brown spiky hair. He was wearing white cloth gloves and a tie around his neck. But the thing that stood out most about this man was the red and yellow plague mask just covering his mouth. Izuku remembers the conversation that he and Night-Eye had before he and Mirio went on the patrol. A flashback ensues, with Night-Eye telling Izuku that he and a group of other heroes are looking for a man by the name of Kai Shizaki. Sorry if I pronounced his name wrong. Otherwise known as Overhaul. The flashback comes to an end. Overhaul: "You'll have to excuse my daughter. She tends to run into things and get herself hurt. And need I say, you two look like a couple of rookies. What agency do you work with?" Mirio would speak up, saying, "Oh, us? Nah, we're still in high school, sir. We've just doing some patrolling." While Mirio was talking, Izuku's attention was fully on the girl. This girl was trembling in his arms and tears were running down her face. Izuku had a sixth sense with his wolf quirk. He is able to sense fear within people. This girl was admitting so much fear that it made Izuku scared for his life. She was scared of something, and she definitely jumped nearly out of her skin when she heard Overhaul's voice. Was he the reason why she was scared? He knew that this girl was in need of help, and he wanted to do everything that he could to protect this girl. Mirio would say to Izuku that they need to get back to Night-Eye's agency, but Izuku wasn't listening. Izuku then stands up, and with Eerie still in his arms, he then looks deeply in Overhaul's eyes and says, "Sir, this child seems to be in the worst conditions. Why is she covered in so many bandages?" Overhaul says, "Wait a minute. Aren't you that boy who had his quirk taken by, what's his name? All for One?" Izuku says, "Yes, sir, but please answer the question." "Eerie is a very clumsy girl. She tends to fall over all the time and get herself hurt. And what is with her expression? She is scared out of her mind right now, and she is on the verge of tears. Well, I recently scolded her not about a few seconds ago, which explains why she ran into you." "Well, sir, I can't just let this go without being thoroughly looked into. Would it be so much as to ask you to follow us to the hospital so that we can have this girl looked at?" The tension around them grows more and more. Mirio would look at Izuku, calling him a fool in his mind. Overhaul would break the silence, saying, "You heroes, always thoroughly wanting to look into the smallest things. And I understand. Tell you what, how about we go talk into a more private area? He turns around and gestures that they walk into the alleyway. He, Eri, and Mirio followed him, and Izuku, excuse me. It's hard to raise a child nowadays. Eri defies me no matter how hard. I try. Izuku says, and what are some things that you try exactly? Mirio, I gotta say, being a parent is probably not the easiest job in the world. Overhaul, yes, children can be so tricky, so determined to do whatever they want. Suddenly, Overhaul reaches over to take off one of his gloves. Eri notices this, and by accident, she uses her quirk while still in Izuku's grasp, and Izuku's back explodes with fire emanating off of it. And within a second, it then disappears. His eyes widen, Mirio's eyes widen, and even Overhaul's eyes widen. What was that? Said Izuku. Overhaul. Oh, it seems that Eri used her quirk on you. My deepest apologies. Eri, get over here before you hurt that man like you did your mother. And with that, Eri then jumped out of Izuku's arms and ran over towards Overhaul. Have you finished your little tantrum? She nods her head, yes. Good. Now let's go. They walk away. Izuku said, wait, what's her quirk? She could possibly be the answer I'm looking to get my quirk back. Overhaul then states that they have to leave and that Eri needs a nap. Izuku tries to follow her, but he was stopped by Mirio. Izuku, no. We know what he's capable of. If he is as dangerous as they say he is, we don't want to risk him injuring the girl, putting her in danger. Izuku watches as the two disappear into the dark. Izuku can hear Eri's silent sobbing, which made him feel guilty that he let her go. The boys then report back to Night Eye about their encounter with Overhaul. The rain slowly picks up. Night Eye, interesting, said daughter, who somehow gave you your quirk back, but only for a brief second. Yes, sir. I actually felt my quirk come back to me, said Izuku. Interesting. I'll inform my group about this girl that you mentioned, but for now, how about you two boys call it a day? You've been through enough. Izuku. But sir, what about the girl? She could possibly be my one chance of getting my quirk back. Night Eye then looks at Izuku with anger and disappointment. Is that all that you care about? After what you told me, you're more concerned about getting your quirk back and less concerned about the girl who was crying and begging for your help? Izuku stopped and looked back at Night Eye as the rain starts to get thicker. And things get a little more intense. It's quiet for a moment, and Izuku is lost for words, but then Night Eye breaks it. You're dismissed, Izuku. Go home. Izuku says, wait, what do you mean I'm dismissed? I mean, I want you gone. You're no longer a part of this. You failed my agency. But, sir, I don't want to hear it. Go home. Night Eye, Bubble Girl, and Mirio walk away, leaving Izuku in the pouring rain. Izuku would head back to his dome room, with a few of his classmates noticing him and the distressed look on his face. They try to ask him what's wrong, but Izuku runs past them to his bedroom. He then walks in and then slams the door. He then flops down on his bed and he begins to regret what he said. His guilty mind would take him back at that moment when Eri would cry in his arms, and those words would echo in his head, "Please help me." Izuku would think about what he had said, how Eri could help him get his quirk back, and at this moment, Izuku began to cry in his hands as he let his mask hit the floor. Izuku would curl into a ball and would cry himself to sleep in a matter of a few minutes. A few hours would pass, and Izuku would be waken up by a knock at his door. It was dark, and the stars were out. Izuku had opened the door, and Bakugo, Shoto, Ida, Yaoyorozu, and Uraraka were there. Oh, you guys, what are you doing up so late? Uraraka says, well, we're worried about you, Izuku. Shoto, yeah, and we want to know why you're so sad. Like, what happened? The young boy would then invite his friends inside his room, and he would tell them what happened. Yaoyorozu says, I've heard of the Yakuza. They're a very dangerous clan. You said that their leader had a daughter? Izuku says, yeah, and when I touched her, she somehow gave me my quirk back. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but I felt normal again. Bakugo says, what? Really? So where is she now? I don't know, said Izuku. She's out there somewhere, but that's not it. When I told Night Eye about what happened, I went off topic and Bakugo comforts Izuku. Listen, man, just breathe. Izuku, I went off topic and I talked about how this girl could possibly help me get my quirk back. Night Eye called me out for being selfish and me only wanting to save her because she could help me, and he's right. At that moment, I really wanted to help her because of that. I feel terrible. Izuku will begin to cry again, struggling to tell them that Night Eye dismissed him and that he is no longer involved in the investigation. The image of Eri crying kept flashing in Izuku's head every time he closed his eyes. He never felt like such a failure and even more ashamed of himself in his life before. Someone wanted his help to which he couldn't provide, and even put his own selfish needs before her safety. Deku would then feel rubbing on his back. His friends would tell him that it's going to be okay. They will find a way to make things work out. Uraraka would share a few words. Well, actually, we'll just say his friend shared a few words. His friend shared a few words. Uraraka, it's going to be okay, Izuku. You could still redeem yourself. You have so much more to give. Even without your fire quirk, you could still help that girl. Yaoyorozu, yeah. And you don't need your fire quirk to be called Fire Fang. Whether you're a fire wolf, an ice wolf, even if you are a shadow wolf, you are Izuku Midoriya, and you are spectacular. Bakugo, yeah. Besides, who survived 9 months in the woods with nothing but his wits and determination? I did, said Izuku. Uraraka, and who protected me from a thug who intended to rob us? I did, said Izuku. Ida, and who protected me from the most dangerous hero killer of all? No, that was me. Yaoyorozu, and who managed to gain the power of the Phoenix to protect his classmates? I did. Shoto, and who stepped in front of my flames and risked his own life to protect others even though he didn't know that he was flame resistant? Izuku says, okay guys, I understand what you're saying. You're telling me about all the times that I managed to save the day or do something impossible even without my firepower. And if I could save Eri without it, then I am Fire Fang. Izuku stands up and says, I need to convince Sir Night Eye to let me back into this so I can help save Eri. Yaoyorozu says, maybe you could contribute in the investigation. Get some intel, show them that you're serious about the girl. They all think, and while during their thinking, Kirishima then walked past Midoriya's room, wishing everyone a good night, when Izuku got a faint scent of Eri. Wait a minute. I know that scent. You guys, wait. I could smell her. Who? Eri? Said Uraraka. Izuku would nod his head yes, and he would leave his bedroom and slowly follows the scent, which led to Kirishima. Oh, hey Midoriya, what's up? Without even responding, Izuku grabbed Kirishima's head and began to sniff at it. This is weird, said Kirishima. Midoriya, what are you doing? Izuku said, Kirishima, what is this on your head? He wipes Kirishima's head with his thumb, and what appeared to rub off was what appeared to be blood. Kirishima, would jokingly admit that his original hair is black and that he uses dye. He uses red dye to dye his hair. Izuku would ask Kirishima if he had ever came across a girl with white hair, and Kirishima would say no. Everyone would catch up to Izuku and they would ask him what's going on, and that with his enhanced scent, he can smell really good, and he can smell that this is Irie's blood on his thumb. They took this to a forensic scientist and they discovered that this is in fact human DNA. They looked at Kirishima and asked him if he had hurt this little girl, to which Kirishima would swear that he didn't. He would go on to explain that a guy who had the ability to warp blades from random parts of his body had shot a bullet at one of the big three. It seems that it messed with his quirk because he was barely able to use it at all. Everyone's face turned to bewilderment. Wait, does Irie have the ability to take others' quirks? Really? Asked Izuku. Yeah, it was really crazy, said Kirishima. We ended up losing the bullet, but we think it might have caused his quirk lossage or whatever this is. But wait, you say that bullet had some little girl's blood in it? Yes, a little girl by the name of Irie. Izuku would tell Kirishima what happened, and he would begin to connect everything together. That Overhaul is using Irie as a sort of lab rat, and is doing probably horrendous experiments on her to weaponize her quirk, her blood, erasing people's quirks, creating this erasing substance. The next day, Izuku ran into Mirio and asked if he could convince Night Eye to see him. Mirio would refuse at first, but when he heard that it involved Irie, he immediately took him to Night Eye's agency. Izuku and Mirio would burst through the door. Night Eye is still crossed with Izuku, but if there was more information about Overhaul, and there was a chance that it could help save the girl, he was willing to listen to it. This better be good, Izuku, said Night Eye. Izuku, Sir Night Eye, Sir Night Eye, Irie's blood can be used to erase or tamper with people's quirks. Night Eye, and how do you know this? Izuku goes on to explain to Night Eye that a classmate of his was struck in the head by these so-called bullets, but he used his hardening quirk to deflect it, but still left remnants of Irie's blood on his forehead. He would also mention that another classmate by another student by the name of Tomoki was hit by these quirk-erasing bullets, but about a few hours later, his quirk was able to work fine once again, so they must be working with some sort of prototype. Night Eye would say that this is bad. If your hypothesis is true, then the situation is more dire. I will have to inform the group that I am with. Izuku said, but wait, Sir Night Eye, you have to let me help. Let me help save the girl. Night Eye says, absolutely not. Your selfish desires is all that drives you. You only see an opportunity to use this girl to get your quirk back. Do you really think that after all that she's been through, that I'm going to let her use her quirk on you? If it's true that what you're saying, that she's being used as a lab rat, don't you think that she's been through enough? The answer is no. Now, I do appreciate you bringing this to my attention, but all you get is a thank you, nothing more. Night Eye then gets up and walks towards the door, but is stopped when Izuku spoke up. You're wrong, sir. Now, is it true that I would like to have my fire quirk back? Yes. But none of that matters right now. What matters is that we bring an end to this clan, whatever it's called, and rescuing Irie. After I spoke with my friends, they helped me realize something about myself. And that's with or without my fire, I am Firefang. With or without it, I can still be a hero. I am what I am, and that's all what I want to be. Now, sir, I am sorry for what I said, but I am willing to atone for it. Even if it means that you end up finding one of these quirk-erasing bullets, and I inject myself with it, and I'm willing to go into this thing 100% quirkless if it means you'll let me save the girl. The room is quiet for a moment. Night Eye says, "Keep your phone up at full volume at all times. If you hear from me within 1 week, I'll call you to inform you of the next step. But if 8 days pass, you'll know what that means." The door then shuts, and Izuku and Mirio would talk amongst each other. They both take a sigh of relief. "Man," says Mirio, "I was afraid he was going to do something bad, but I think you actually won him over. I do hope that he will let you help, but I have to ask, are you really serious about what you said? If they do find a vial of these quirk-erasing bullets with Erie's DNA, you would take it and go into this thing without your powers?" Izuku nods his head. "Yes, I'm willing to do anything if it means that Erie will be safe." A few days would pass, and during those days, Izuku would make sure that his phone is at full charge and at high volume. He was still awaiting for Night Eye's call. When nearly 7 days had passed, Izuku thought that he wasn't going to get to help save the girl. That was until he was getting ready to lay his head down to sleep, and then his phone rang. It was Night Eye. He quickly picked up. "Hello?" Sir Night Eye told Izuku to meet him at his agency tomorrow morning and to not be late. Izuku then said, "Yes, sir. I'll be there first thing in the morning." It's the next day. Izuku immediately got out of bed, got dressed, ate his breakfast as fast as he could, and ushered out the door. While he was on his way down to Night Eye's agency, he was greeted by Sue, Uraraka, and Kirishima. "Oh, hey guys." Uraraka says, "Oh, hey Izuku. We were just heading downtown." Sue steps in, saying, "We were invited to partake in some investigation work, but we're unsure of what it's about." Kirishima says, "Oh, well, Fat Gum invited me about the situation that happened the other night when you found that girl's blood on my head." Uraraka would then take Izuku aside and ask him if what they found helped him get back in touch with Night Eye. Izuku would tell her yes, and he would go on to thank her for helping him believe in himself again. Uraraka would smile and she would say, "You're welcome," as she brings him in for a hug. They all reach Night Eye's agency, and the four teens enter a room with an elongated table surrounded by pro heroes. They all look at the teens, which led things feeling a bit awkward. Things got a little more intense when their teacher, Aizawa, appeared right behind them, which spooked the teens, scaring them, causing them to jump out of fear. Night Eye would then ask Izuku to come up front and have him tell everyone what he had learned about Eri and what her blood is used for. And everyone would be shocked and would devise a plan to save the girl. Night Eye would inform everyone that he may know where she is, but before they get things started, he then turns his attention to Izuku and says, "Izuku, do you remember what you told me in my office last week? You mean the part where if you ever find these quirk erasing bullets, I will be willing to go into this thing without my quirks, if it meant that I could save Eri?" Night Eye says, "Yes, that is correct." He then reaches into his pocket and pulls out what appears to be a red bullet filled with a red substance. It also had a needle at the end of it. This is the serum that will do just that. A few nights ago, a worker of mine was nearly struck by one of these bullets. But luckily, the guy who tried to shoot him with it was a poor shot, and it missed him. So he brought it to me, and I saved it for you. He then puts the bullet down on the table and places it in front of Izuku. "So, are you really willing to do as you promise? Are you going to give up your quirks for a certain amount of time? Even if it means you go up against an opponent that may be even stronger than you are, with your easily breakable body, can handle?" Izuku stares intensely at the bullet, and he picks it up. His hand started shaking. Night Eye asks one more time, "So, are you going to do it?" Without even saying anything, Izuku then took the syringe, grinned his teeth, and then pierced it into his left shoulder. The bullet needle then drained all of the substance into Izuku's body, and Izuku stumbles around. Other than the uncomfortableness of stabbing himself in the chest with a needle, he felt a sharp, stinging pain. When he used the table as the support, he expected to feel something else, but there was nothing else. That was it. He then looks down at his hands and he activates full cowling. He realizes that he still has all of his quirks. Looking at Night Eye, he's confused. The needle contained water with red food coloring, and decided to let Izuku help save Eri. Izuku would stand there, asking why didn't he give him a real one? Because I don't want you to go into this thing with no powers. Besides, you've already convinced me that you're worthy of helping. And you're also worthy of that other thing. Now, go and get ready. FYI, that other thing was one for all. Mirio and Uraraka approached Izuku, and Mirio says, "Wow, you were really willing to go in this without your quirks." "Yeah," says Izuku. "It's important." Aizawa takes his students aside and informs them that what they are going to be doing is seriously dangerous and that they might get hurt. And if they want to back out of this, they can, and informs them that there is no shame in stepping out. They all said that they want to go into this, and so they would head their way down to the location where Eri is. Everyone gets ready, and Izuku tells his friends to please be careful. From outside the hideout, the police and pro heroes stood nearby, and Uraraka approached Izuku telling him good luck and to please be careful. Izuku gave her a reassuring smile and tells her to do the same and gives her a kiss. Good luck. Everyone readies themselves, and the moment that they rang the doorbell, all hell broke loose. People started attacking the police, but the pros were there to protect them. Night Eye and his group ran inside. Soon they entered a secret passage and would start running. Overhaul is aware of their infiltration and would prepare, grabbing a few perfect quirk erasing bullets. Over where Izuku's team was, they were running through what feels like an endless hallway until the walls started warping. What's going on?" asked Mirio. Suddenly, the walls started talking. "What the hell?" "You'll never reach my boss on time. He will succeed in his mission, and you will rot in hell." Suddenly, they find themselves sinking into the ground as the ground starts to slowly turn into putty. Mirio manages to run before he could be swallowed by the ground. Izuku watches as Mirio runs, and he felt so much determination to save Eri. Izuku knew that he had to show the same amount of determination, and he got out of that situation. So, Izuku started climbing back up with incredible speeds. He would then turn into his werewolf form and then start running, catching up with Mirio while everyone was left alone to deal with the three men underground. Mirio and Izuku are running side by side. Izuku says, "Mirio, the last time we had Eri, we let her go away. And it was the most painful thing that I have ever experienced. If we are going to be real heroes, we must protect those who need protecting. And we must be willing to lay down our lives. Do you understand what I mean?" Mirio nods his head, and they would continue running. The walls started to warp around them, making the ceiling drop on top of them as if it was wax melting from intense heat. As the walls continued to melt, it started to create barriers between them. Mirio would use his quirk to phase through them, while Izuku would use his brute strength to bash through the walls. This would go on for a while until Izuku and Mirio would look up and they would see a giant eyeball in the distance. Both of the boys would nod their heads at each other, and Izuku would grab Mirio by the back of his shirt. He would then spin around a few times and then throw him at the giant eyeball. Mirio then punches it, and a loud scream ensues. The hallways would then go back to normal, and a man would fall from the ceiling to the ground, wallowing around in pain. As Mirio knocked him out, the two boys continue their run. Soon, they see her, Eri, but unfortunately Overhaul is next to her. "Eri," said Izuku. "Overhaul, it's over. We're here for the girl. Your days of experimenting with her are over." Overhaul says, "You heroes are really starting to become a pain in my behind." Mirio says, "How could you do this to your own daughter? Your flesh and blood." Izuku replies, "It's because she's not his daughter. You see, I have a highly sense of smell, and I am able to tell who is relative to who. And those two, they do not smell alike at all." Overhaul would admit that it is true. He would also then take off his glove, and he would then touch the ground. It would break apart and then reform into spikes as it lunges towards the two boys. While they were distracted, Overhaul would then pick up Eri and then run away with her, telling his men to take care of those two. As Izuku busted through the rubble and Mirio permeates, the two boys suddenly felt dizzy, barely able to stand on their own 2 feet. They then look up and see a man drinking alcohol while wearing a mask just like Kai's. Mirio says, "I think that guy's quirk is messing with our heads." Izuku holds his stomach, almost on the verge of vomiting. "Yeah, I agree." Suddenly, they hear a loud gunshot. The bullet missed them and it ricocheted off the walls. They look and see a man with the same mask holding a firearm. Izuku would whisper to Mirio to go after the girl and that he will handle the goons. Mirio nods his head in agreement and he phases into the ground. The two men are surprised. While they were distracted, Izuku ushered in at them, but once again, he was struck by the man's quirk, making him feel drowsy and on the verge of vomiting. He falls to the ground, feeling like his body is slowly shutting down on him. The man looked at his associate and said, Shouldn't you be filling him with lead right now?" The other one said, "In due time. Right now, I want to know a thing or two about this Wolfman. Let me ask you something, kid. The first time you met my boss and the girl, when you let her go with him, did you actually care about her?" "Of course I did," said Izuku. "It wasn't until I discovered about her quirk that she could help me get my quirk back is when I really needed her." Izuku covered his mouth, wondering why did he say that. The man would then go on to explain his abilities to compel people to tell the truth about themselves. And he would ask Izuku another question. "Why do you want to save this girl so much?" Izuku would then get up while leaning against the wall with one arm and digging his claw into the wall to keep himself up. He then takes a few deep breaths and says, "It's because I want her safe. She's only a little girl and she suffered the most out of anyone in the world. And seeing such an innocent soul endure so much pain, she deserves better." Izuku would start to make a fist so tight that his own claws would start digging into his skin, causing him to bleed between the spaces in between his fingers. Izuku would then stand up straight, flexing his claws out. They were bloody. "And until I see that girl smile, I can't live with myself." Izuku would then use stalemate on the drunk man, and he would fall to the ground, landing on his head, rendering him unconscious. While the other one was distracted, Izuku then lunged at him, dodging the bullets the best that he could. When he reached him, he then grabbed the man by the head and slammed his head into the ground, causing it to crack, knocking him out. When he had finished, a loud rumble ensues, and a few feet down the hall, Izuku sees a wall has formed. Izuku ran over to investigate. When he saw the man was still holding the pistol, still groaning and fighting the urge to pass out, Izuku would then grab him and throw him into the wall, causing it to cave in, and he would see inside. Inside, Izuku saw a bunch of earth spikes on the ground. Mirio would be holding Eri in his arms. He suddenly finds himself under fire with bullets, and Izuku would look over. He would see another man with a firearm shooting at Mirio. Izuku would then lunge at him, and he would tackle him to the ground and punch him in the face over and over again until he stopped moving, knocking him out. While Overhaul was distracted, Mirio would attack him by kicking him in the face, and then bumps would start forming on his head from the kick. He then feels around on his face and he says, "You bastard! You'll pay for that!" Overhaul would cause more spikes to form towards Mirio, but Izuku would strike Overhaul, causing him to break an arm on Overhaul, not Izuku, and then swinging again, breaking another arm. He then tries to strike again, but then Overhaul dodges and recovers his broken arms. Izuku witnesses this and says, "Oh, so you're able to recover your body. Perhaps I should aim for the head next." Izuku then lunges at him, but Overhaul forms a barrier made of concrete surrounding his body, creating some sort of shield to protect him from his enemies. But just as he thinks he's safe, he was struck by Mirio's fists permeating through the ground, giving him an uppercut, causing him to break through his barrier, leaving a large bruise on his face. Overhaul finds himself bleeding from his nose. His blood started to boil, and a vein pops from his head from extreme anger. The two boys are standing in front of him, and Izuku says, "Surrender or else." Overhaul looks over and he sees Eri, and under his plague mask he smiles, saying, "Surrender? I don't think so. For you see, I have one more trick up my sleeve." He then taps the ground with his bare hands, and earth spikes would start to form right behind the boys, but the spikes were heading towards Eri. The boys would then move quickly, running towards Eri, but Izuku would run on all fours and Mirio would permeate through the ground. Just as they feared that they weren't going to make it, Mirio then permeated through the ground and used himself as a human shield to protect Eri from the spikes. A spike then pierced Mirio in his lower back and completely pierces through his torso. And just as another spike is about to form, aiming towards his heart, Izuku quickly ushered in and broke it before it could actually reach him. Izuku then quickly breaks the spike that was in Mirio's back, but he made sure that the spike part stayed in there, because if it was removed, Mirio would bleed out. Mirio, oh my god, are you okay? Mirio, in a sarcastic voice, says, yeah, this sharp thing in my back is just honky-dory. Izuku says, Eri, are you okay? Eri, with a little bit of Mirio's blood staining her face, is a little bit distraught by what just happened to her hero. She continues to shiver and weep, but Izuku comforts her, saying, hey, it's gonna be alright. We're gonna get you out of here, and you're gonna be in a safe place, okay? Izuku looks over and he sees Overhaul. He's distracted with his men for some reason. He then quickly carries Mirio over to the hole that he made, and he told Mirio to get Eri out of here while he distracts Overhaul for as long as he can. Mirio then would ask, Izuku, what about you? There's no time, just go. The two would then stumble off, and Izuku would face Overhaul by himself. Overhaul would then heal two of his henchmen. He would then point at Izuku, demanding the girl back. Izuku refuses, and he tells him that in any moment the pro heroes will show up and his reign of terror will end. It's over, Overhaul. Izuku then powers up full cowling while in his werewolf form. Under his mask, Overhaul smiles deviously and says, well, we'll see about that. But first things first. He then turned his finger into a gun motion and said, fire, as he flexed his thumb. What are you talking about? Izuku feels a sharp, stinging pain in his back. He then turns around and sees one of his henchmen with a firearm awaken with his gun aimed right at him. Suddenly, Izuku feels like there's something wrong. Red lines started forming around his body. He feels his strength slowly weakening, and he turns back to his human form. As he lets out a scream, he falls to the ground. He doesn't feel his quirks anymore. His wolf quirk, one for all, it's just gone. Suddenly, a red bullet falls to the ground, and Izuku knew what that meant. No, it can't be. Overhaul gloats, saying, you should have never got involved in this, kid, because now, thanks to the newly developed quirk erasing bullets, your quirk is officially gone forever. Izuku's face turns white, for he simply cannot believe what was just told to him. It can't be true. No, it can't be true. Izuku felt so low of himself, because at first he lost his wolf quirk after neglecting it for so long. He's worked most of his life to perfect his fire quirk, and it was just taken just like that in the middle of a fight. And now he's lost All Might's power. The one thing that could have protected this world from real evil. And he just lost it. Izuku was in a lot of denial. He then starts tightly squeezing a concrete boulder, trying to break it, but he can't. His super strength is gone. Overhaul sees how vulnerable Izuku is, and he tells one of his henchmen to go get Eri for him. Right away, sir, said one of the henchmen. He tried to run towards the hole that Izuku was in front of, but Izuku then tackled the man down to the ground, and he would start relentlessly beating him, not even giving the man a chance to fight back. But just before Izuku's eyes, he saw what looked like a blue arrow rip out from his hoodie and right towards him, but Izuku dodges. He would then use the boulder that was in his hands to knock the man out, most likely giving him unreversible trauma. Izuku stands up and turns his attention back over to Overhaul and says, I swore on my life to save Eri, with or without my power. I stand against evil to protect those who can't protect themselves. Overhaul sighs and says, You're like a cockroach that I just can't seem to get rid of. Don't you understand? Your quirks are gone forever. You've been telling me that it's over, but really, it's over for you. You're nothing but a weak, useless excuse of a human being. A quirkless nobody. Izuku says no. It's not over. Yet. Izuku starts walking closer to Overhaul with the boulder still in hand. As long as I breathe, I will fight. As long as my heart continues to pump blood into my body, I will fight. You could take away my power. You could try to strip me of my dignity. But I will continue to fight for Eri. Izuku then throws a larger boulder trying to hit Overhaul, but instead he ended up hitting one of the henchmen, knocking him out. Again, a lot of knocking out going on in this one. Overhaul looks to his henchman and then back to Izuku. He was breathing heavily. Overhaul says, Alright, kid, I'm going to tell you something that you need to hear. But first, I need a quick second. A word from my associate. He then walks over to his henchman, and then he would touch him, deforming him from molecule to molecule, and then fusing himself to his body. He then reformed with 4 arms. They were blackish, reddish, purplish, and there were claws at the end of each fingertip. Overhaul would then reach his hand out, and for some reason a mouth formed just on the palm of his hand that he reached out with. The mouth then spoke with visible sound waves coming from it. You're nothing but trouble. All you ever do is bring anyone pain and suffering. Just look at these heroes trying to save you. One of them is impaled and injured, bleeding for his life, and another one had just lost his quirk. And it's all your fault. You should feel ashamed of yourself, Eri. Where Mirio and Eri was, they heard every word that he had spoken. Eri starts crying and shaking in fear, and she would run back. Mirio would try to stop her, but he was in too much pain. Eri enters the room again. Izuku sees her. Eri, what are you doing? Before she could say anything, Overhaul says, Eri, be honest. Do you really want their help? Eri stood there with her lips quivering. No. Izuku's eyes widen, and Overhaul says, Do you see now? She doesn't want your help. Eri would start to walk closer and say, But do you promise to give him his quirk back? Well, I can try, but I can't make any promises, said Overhaul. Eri would start to tremble and say, Okay, I'll come back with you. That's my girl. Now come over here. Overhaul extends one of his hands out, and Eri would walk closer to Overhaul, but Izuku would walk in front of her, telling her to stop. You don't have to do this. But I do. It's my fault that your friend is hurt. It's my fault that your quirks are gone. Izuku would place a hand on her face and would say, "No, it's not your fault. It's his fault." Izuku has his back turned on Overhaul. He's the one who made these quirk erasing bullets that took it. He used your quirk to make them. Eerie, look at me. I don't care if all my quirks are gone. What matters is you. You are the reason I came all the way here. At first, I saw you as an opportunity to help me get my quirk back, but after talking with my friends, they helped me realize I can still be a hero even without my fire. Overhaul butts in, saying, "Well, there is a small chance that Eerie could possibly get your other quirks back, but considering the fact that All for One took your fire quirk with him when he died, she can't bring that one back permanently. She would have to be with you your entire life, and you wouldn't be willing to put a child in danger just so that you can shoot fire from your little fingertips again, would you?" Izuku would turn his attention back to Eerie. "Eerie, I don't care about that. I would be willing to say goodbye to my powers forever. I would be willing to lay down my life if it meant that you were safe. The only thing that I ask of you, Eerie, is that you believe in me. Do you believe in me?" Eerie would start to tear up. She would lunge at Izuku, wrapping her arms around his neck, saying yes. Izuku would wrap his arms around her, and he would hug her back. But suddenly, Izuku was pierced from the back, completely through the center of his stomach. He would fall to the floor with blood splooging out of his chest and back wound. Eerie's eyes would widen as she watches this. She looks and sees Overhaul touching the ground, causing him to do what he did to Izuku. He walks closer to Eerie and says, "Man, that guy was seriously getting on my nerves. Now come on, Eerie. We need to leave now." Eerie would then look down at Izuku, who would mumble to Eerie to run, but she would look back up at Overhaul, who told her to come here again. Eerie would then make both fists, tightly gripping her, tightening her hand, and then gritting her teeth, and she would yell, "No!" She would then quickly remove the spike from Izuku's back, and she would use her rewind power on him, healing Izuku from the hole in his torso. She would then return Izuku's quirks to him, one for all, and his wolf quirks. He could hear them in his head again. Izuku would slowly get up and would use Mirio's ripped cape to latch Eerie onto his back so that he couldn't lose her. Overhaul would have anger flowing throughout his body out of frustration, and he would yell, "You disobedient brat! How dare you betray me!" He would then touch the ground, causing more spikes to form and pillars to form, but Izuku would change into his werewolf form and power up full cowling with green electricity surfing throughout his body. He would then zoom past the spikes directly at Overhaul and then punch him with all his might, sending him flying backwards, breaking a few ribs and squashing a few of his organs. Just as Overhaul would try to get back up, blood would start spewing from his mouth, and the most unexpected thing happened. The ceiling of the place that they were standing on caves in, with a giant monster and Ryuku, the dragon lady, coming down from the top. When that happened, the rest of the heroes showed up with Night Eye and Aizawa alongside police officers. Izuku would run over to them, informing them that he has the girl. But before they could do anything, a loud rumble ensues, and a bright light appears before them, and Overhaul would fuse himself to the giant man, turning himself into a multi-armed thing with a beak for a mouth where Overhaul sat at. He looked dead at Izuku with hatred in his eyes and said, "Give her back!" He then reaches out with his giant hand towards Izuku, but Izuku flinched, raising both of his arms up, expecting an impact, but the impact never came. He then heard Irie's voice saying, "Wow, we're up so high." Izuku then opened his eyes, and he would see that they were indeed very high into the sky, almost as high as a skyscraper. Whoa, how did we get this high? Was it one for all? But how? My legs aren't broken. Wait, Irie, are you doing this? Right, it must be her rewind quirk, so she can heal me back to normal just like she did down there. Suddenly, we're greeted with Overhaul in his mutant form. He tried to reach towards Izuku, but before he could actually get to him, Izuku told Irie to lend him some of her power. Okay, said Irie. Suddenly, yellow electricity started emanating from Irie's horn and would spread out to Izuku's body, and Izuku's body was then engulfed in flames. He then balled his fist up as tight as he could, and he smiled. And he looked directly at Overhaul and said, "You're not taking her back." Their fight begins while in midair. Izuku would start zipping and zooming back and forth at Overhaul, relentlessly punching him into pieces, only for him to recover himself. Izuku would then hit him with a barrage of punches, barely able for Overhaul to keep himself together. While the fight continues, Izuku would start feeling strange. He would feel hot and cold at the same time, and he would have this feelings of his arms and legs breaking and then healing repeatedly over and over again. He then looks down at his hands and saw a familiar glow, and then an idea came to mind. "Irie, I need you to use your rewind powers and rewind me as far as you can until I say stop." But it could hurt you." Izuku gives her a sympathetic smile, and he would place a hand on her cheek, saying, "It will be okay. Just trust me." Irie then nods her head in agreement, and she closes her eyes, pushing Izuku back. Overhaul had regained himself and angrily lunges at Izuku while still in midair. "Just a little bit further, Irie." Izuku's body started to glow with an aura of orange and red light. Izuku smiles and says, "This ends now!" Izuku then reaches both of his arms out, and a light of orange and red took the shape of a giant bird with its wings extended out. He's using the powers of the Phoenix, just like in the USJ attack. Overhaul sees this. His arms start turning to dust as his legs. And as Izuku is doing this, he is also using other forms of his powers, such as using his alpha call to call upon more clones of himself to attack Overhaul while he's using the Phoenix's powers. Overhaul yells, "No, no, no!" Suddenly, time slows down for Overhaul as he looks at Izuku and Irie. Izuku with eyes of determination and Irie with a face of courage. He will remember how often Irie would look at him with fear and tears in her eyes. Now she is looking at him with bravery. Overhaul's arms and legs turned to dust, and there was no way for him to recover his body. He then begins to fall to the ground as he thinks, she is all grown up. And then he hits the concrete ground, leaving a huge crater. When the dust cleared, it had revealed that he had separated himself from his henchmen, but their arms and legs were missing as well. Izuku then landed back on the ground. Eri had lost control of her quirk, and Izuku starts to feel excruciating pain. He tries to calm Eri down, but she tells him that she can't stop it. Izuku could not reach Eri to remove her from his back. He felt stuck. He falls to the ground, screaming. Night-Eye and Aizawa ran out, and Aizawa quickly stops Eri's quirk. She passes out and falls off of Izuku's shoulder, but Izuku caught her just before she could hit the ground. He then said, I got you. A smile comes across his face and he says it again. I got you. Eri and Mirio would be taken to the hospital, and obvious Night-Eye lives in this one. Izuku would inform All Might at the hospital that he had lost One for All at one point, but Eri managed to help him get it back, and his wolf quirks. All Might would ask Izuku if she managed to help him get his fire quirk back, but Izuku would say yes, but it wasn't permanent. I can only have my fire quirk back if she's with me, but that's never going to change anything. I am what I am, and Eri is the living proof of that. Soon, Izuku and Mirio, after he was stitched up and healed enough to walk around, visited Eri in her room, and she would thank them both for saving her, but she would apologize to Izuku for not helping him permanently get his fire quirk back. I'm sorry. Izuku would place a hand on her head and says, hey, it's alright. Let me tell you something, Eri. I may have had my fire back for a moment, but you want to know what really helped me defeat Overhaul? You did. You believed in me, and you gave me some of your power. You have an incredible quirk, Eri. And at least you helped me get my other quirks back, and you saved my life as well. And it's because of you. You are my little hero, Eri. Eri tears up and hugs Izuku, and Izuku would stroke the back of her hair and say, you're a good girl, and you're safe now. So please, no more crying, okay? Eri would then nod her head and then wipe away her tears, and Izuku would ask her to smile instead. She tries to smile, but she is unable to. Mirio would come up with a solution that Eri needs to experience their school festival that's coming. She could try some of the good food, like candy apples or something like that. Eri wasn't sure what it was about candy apple, but it made her drool over the thought of it. The boys would then ask Aizawa if she could go with them for the festival, and Aizawa would agree. After they visited Eri, Night-Eye would then tell Izuku that he did an excellent job and that he's sorry for ever doubting him. And he would also thank him again. Thank me? Thank me for what? Night-Eye would go on to tell Izuku that he saw a future where he died trying to save Eri, but somehow he changed the future. Of which Izuku was a bit thrown off, but he's glad that everyone made it out alive. A few days later, the day of the festival came, and Eri had shown up with Izuku and Mirio. By the end of the day, Eri smiled for the first time, which helped put Izuku at peace. And on that day, Izuku learned a valuable lesson. And it's to always cherish everything that you have in life. Because you never know what good you have until it's gone. And even if it's forever, you could still find the greatest things of pleasure that life has to offer. You just have to go out there and find it. And with that, the story of What If Deku Was a Firewolf comes to an end. It's been a pleasure making this story, but now it's time to say goodbye. Thank you. Well, actually, there is something else that happened. You see, a few months had passed after Eri was saved. All Might took Izuku to this place called Eye Island. All Might speaks to Izuku as they are entering a laboratory. Young Midoriya, after what you had told me about young Eri, I got an idea to tell a special friend of mine about her ability. Izuku looks, and he sees a man in front of a giant monitor. He then turns around, revealing himself. Izuku gasps. The man speaks. Oh, hello there. You must be Izuku Midoriya. Izuku has a hard time finding the right words. You're... The man then speaks. Mr. David Shields, at your service. All Might, what are we doing here? With his iconic smile, All Might then looked at Izuku and said, I'll let David Shield explain that part to you. David would go on to tell Izuku that All Might informed him about Eri and how she helped him get his fire quirk back, but only temporarily. And with Eri's permission, they were able to create a 1-inch long circulated contraption that has Eri's energy flowing from her horn within this little thing. He then hands it to Izuku, and Izuku looks at it, wondering what to do with it. He then looks back at David Shield, who then pointed at his neck and then said, try it on. Izuku slowly raises the coin-looking thing to his neck, and then it latches onto his body. It then activates with Eri's energy flowing throughout it. Izuku can feel it, the warmth of his fire within him. He then looks up, opens his eyes, and fire is seen flowing within his irises as we fade to black. Now that is the end. And that concludes What If Deku Was a Firewolf. I hope you all enjoyed this series. I really had a lot of fun making it. I'm sorry that it took so long to end it, but here we are, and I did it. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed the video once again, and if you made it to the end of this video, consider yourselves #blessed. Make sure to like, subscribe, and also... Shinji! Crank that soldier, boy!